Welcome to the cult of honesty. And lots of people are talking about cults these days, and we decided that we would name my show The Cult of Honesty simply because sometimes people try to simply call people names in order to stop a conversation, simply label people in order to stop actually people from moving forward. And so tonight we're going to have a discussion. And I'm talking about a meaningful discussion where people are practicing respect, kindness, and actually a bit of logic from time to time, and that may be good. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. We have a Google Hangout, and if you would like to get involved in the Hangout, you need to contact Greg Bray at some point and try to see if you can hook up. I want to make some statements because oftentimes people are called heretics, especially by Christians. And I want to deal with that term before we even get into the Hangout because I think it's unfortunate that so many people are using the term heretic in a negative sense. If you look at the Greek word, it's the word heresis. Now, that term normally means, and please understand that words really don't have any kind of inherent meaning. They have usage. But most of the usages that we find in the first century of this particular Greek term, it simply means to have an opinion. Now, opinions are neither good nor bad until they're placed into a context, and then you can decide whether something is good or bad, and when they're bad, they are bad, and when they're good, they are good, and maybe a little bit in between. So my point is, it's not bad to be a heretic. But then again, it may be, in other words, a bad opinion is not something that we need to cherish. In other words, if you go to the doctor and he has an opinion that you have arthritis and he didn't see the cancer, that's a terrible opinion, a tragic opinion. And so we need to rethink all of these terms that people use against us. And we need to start saying, I don't mind being called a heretic. Simply, it may be a compliment. In other words, I have an opinion and it's valuable. It may help you. And so with that said, I don't want to stop the conversation, but I want to emphasize we are here at the cult of honesty. This is the place for intellectual, spiritual, and scriptural honesty. We don't want to play dodgeball here. We want to be honest. And that means that we don't have to accept everything in the Bible or anything in the Bible. We don't have to accept something just because Mama said something. And so we are going to do our best tonight to be honest in our conversation. And so at this point in time, I'm simply going to back away. And just before the show ends, that is within the last 5 minutes, I will interrupt. And maybe from time to time I will interrupt and put my 2 cents in. But I want to make some closing comments because I think it's useful to have hangouts like this so we can actually move forward. And so with that stated, I would like to introduce Joey Livingston and also the rest of the guys in the hangout. Joey.
Hello. Oh, don't pull them up yet. That's a big crowd, busy and loud. Turn them down. Just turn them down. There we go. Much better. So tonight the discussion is, let me read that again, beautiful. Why can't we just leave people alone and let them believe what they want to believe? This is the cult of honesty, and before we get started, I want to ask Dr. Jones when I can put my headdress on and pull the heart out of the chest of a young virgin, perhaps Matthew Rhodes or Greg Bray.
You're probably going to have to do that on your show.
On my show?
On your show, yeah. That would be unusual.
Okay.
But typical.
Let's bring the hangout in. Noise and all. Hello, Greg.
Hello, Joey. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Are we ready to get this conversation started?
I like to think so. I wanted to give a brief introduction on my end. I was the one who suggested the topic for this week because it's thrown at me quite a bit. And I know that this is one where the New Covenant group in general gets it thrown at. It's not just atheists that have this one sent our way. And it, I think, can bring us all together with the respect that I think every single person in this Hangout has probably been asked something similar to that at some point, regardless of whether you are a Christian, a theist, a deist, a believer, however you describe yourself. I'm pretty confident that all of us have been asked, why can't you just leave people alone and let them believe what they want to believe? So today, we want to address that topic, and I, once again, intend to curate more than anything and let our guests do the talking as much as possible.
All right. Let me begin with a question, and perhaps I'm giving away the punchline here. But when people ask us that question, why can't you just leave people alone and let them believe what they want to believe? My first question is that really the question that they're asking? Over to you, Greg.
Well, any takers? Anybody interested? I see a hand up. Bob? Bob?
I have heard that question, but every time I've ever heard it, it came from somebody who didn't like the fact that I was saying something unconventional or unorthodox. I have never had anybody who had a different opinion from mine, be it unconventional, ever say that to me. It seemed to be part of a dialogue. But it's only people who had a very traditional orthodox faith that have ever said that to me. It may not be everyone else's experience, but that's been mine.
I think that a lot of it also comes from, some folks aren't even trying to convince somebody else. A lot of it is just that they have a difference of opinion, that they're expressing what that might be. Maybe it's skepticism, maybe it's just a little bit of, trying to rationalize through what it is, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, well, you're supposed to believe because you have to believe, and if you don't, you're a heretic or you're going to hell or whatever it is. And I think that ultimately it's not really why are you trying to change people's minds? It's more along the lines of why can't they change my mind? That's what I've been seeing.
That is Nelson Rose. I think I jumped the gun a little bit here. Let's just take a brief moment and introduce everybody who's in our Hangouts. Can we show that on the screen here? Starting from left to right on my screen, we have Alexa. Good to have you back with us, Alexa.
Hi, great to be here.
And then we have Ariel, two of our regulars here. Hey, Ariel.
I'm honored to join.
And then we have a new face to our Hangouts, but not a new face to the New Covenant group. This is B.J. Saylor. He has been a guest on a couple of our shows, and he's going to have a lot of things to throw into this conversation, aren't you, B.J.?
Oh, well, I'm only hoping to. That's all I can hope for.
All right, no pressure. Then we have the unconventional pastor, Bob Graves, followed by Dennis Scusi, a couple more regulars. Hey, guys. And then our Hangouts host, Greg Bray. And then we have Nelson Rose, a new face to our Hangouts, but again, not a new face to the New Covenant group. It's good to see you. And then we have Nick Albertini. He's probably the one making all the background noise. Hey, Nick, it's good to see you. And
I mute myself.
And then who's the one in the corner? I can't see it on my screen. We got a new face here. Who is this?
No, that's Ben Flores.
Ben Flores.
Benjamin.
Yeah, I almost got in an argument with him today. How are you doing, Ben?
I can only be so lucky.
Very good. It's good to see you. Okay, I didn't want to spend too long on that, but I wanted to make sure that our cast of panelists was known tonight. All right, so back to the conversation. Greg, why don't you pick us up where we left off?
BJ, you said that you may have some input on this topic.
Yeah, what I was just going to say is that usually whenever I'm confronted with someone and I exchange an opinion on belief, I often find that, I'm a very, I can be very aggressive and abrasive, unfortunately, and I'm very direct. And the thing that I've experienced is that, because the heretic label to me has almost become a bore. I've been called a heretic so much. But the thing is, to me, is I think the reason why a lot of people can't have a conversation like this is because, with my experience in fundamentalism, whenever you attack, or maybe even just question, most of my cases probably seems like an attack, they really seem to tie in those belief systems with their own personal sense of identity. And when you seem to do that, or even challenge that entire foundation, not just their worldview, but who they think they are, then that seems to be why a conversation that we're having right now seems to be so rare. in my opinion.
I wanted to make one quick comment on this one and see if anybody, or I guess a directed question, see if anybody has a comment on it. But I'm looking at it from the opposite perspective. Not so much why do people want us to stay out of their own lives, but why do we not want to? I mean, what is our answer to that question when somebody says, why can't you just leave people alone and let them believe what they want to believe? What? Anybody have a response to that as to why, what answer you could give? Dennis, we have a hand up.
Well, what I think, if you let people believe what they believe, to a point that's okay. But I'm thinking, what if their beliefs lead to violence, terrorism, all these extremist parts of their religion? I think that it's a good part actually to talk to them to actually get rid of that problem out of their minds just with a good conversation. So I think that is not to say totally, okay, let them believe what they believe and let them alone. But people die every day because of their beliefs that they have to kill people for their God. I think that's not a good thing.
You know, there are a lot of religions that that have that sort of subtle undertone of violence, and but let's focus for a moment on Christianity, because that's the one I know. I think that's the one that most of us are in this chat room or this hangout are familiar with. And if anybody else wants to talk about another religion, we can. But you know, the basis of Christianity is the Bible, and though parts of the Bible do talk about love, there are other parts that advocate not just excluding people, but killing the people that we exclude. And you know, the people who hold tightly to the Bible as an infallible source of truth will, in the same breath, make that claim and then also say that, you know, these things are to be taken figuratively, or God's not that way anymore. But no matter how you spin it, to believe those things justifies somewhere, if only in one synapse of your brain, it justifies that in some context, somewhere, it's okay to slaughter an entire nation of people, or to kill a baby, or to cut a pregnant woman open and rip her baby out of her stomach and dash it against the rocks. And so I guess the question is, for me is, you know, who is it that doesn't want to disable every synapse that holds that sort of belief system?
I could add something real quick. Or go ahead, Dennis.
Oh, sorry. What I was saying to answer this question, I think the fundamentalist people, if they take the whole Bible literally, my opinion is that a lot of us we need to get rid of it in our society, but a lot of it's just abusive.
Sure.
I would actually take that kind of radical position too, as far as imposing what you're allowed to indoctrinate your child into. I think most of us would agree that indoctrinating a child to accept radical Islam and to be brought up to believe that martyrdom is something to be achieved is not okay. It's only another step to, say, traumatizing your child, telling them about hell and threatening them with terrible, terrible things is not that much worse in a lot of ways. It's still ruining a perfectly good human being from their potential and
Absolutely.
sort of paralyzing them emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to, I guess, you're right again. It sounds like the answer that I'm getting from you guys is that the reason that you can't keep your mouth shut is because these beliefs do harm. They actually do cause bad things in the world. But what about for people that don't necessarily have, I mean, they're not fundamentalists, they're not harmful in these situations, but I mean, right, your moderate believers, even your very, very liberal believers, are still people who could be, and liberal, again, in the free sense, not the political sense. I mean, these are people that could be hurt or offended. You could be taking away something that gives them hope, gives them a feeling of security. And I mean, that could be potentially harmful to them. Why why do you feel that that's an okay risk to take?
I have some input, but I'll let Bob and Dennis go ahead because they've had their hands up here.
You go first.
I was going to say that I find that sometimes this comes to me when people are complaining about what I'm saying, that I'm not actually talking to them. Like, I have a blog, I have a show called The Unconventional Pastor, and I'm talking to people who actually do want to hear what it is that I have to say that might challenge some of these traditional things. But traditional people will come along and they're not even actually asking me to not say this to them. They're asking me to not say it at all to anybody.
Yes.
But
you're bringing up a very good point. Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
I think that it's important, though, that on some of those issues that where people have a right to differ, we don't need to necessarily speak up there to those people, but in the dialogue that goes on, we're going to talk.
You're bringing up a fantastic point, because, and this is why I asked the question at the beginning. When people ask that question, why can't we just let people believe what they want to believe? Is that really the question that they're asking? Because these are people, a lot of these people, number one, believe in going from door to door and putting your foot in the door and being intrusive on people about their beliefs because they're trying to save people from hell or trying to get them into the kingdom of God.
Not just being intrusive, but a lot of condemnation.
Right.
A lot of
But
hellbound. And that's the biggest thing. It's the condemnation that a lot of people find so offensive.
Sure. But at the same time, they are coming to, I mean, for me personally, they are coming to me. They are coming on my Facebook timeline or on Dr. Jones's Facebook timeline, and they are asking these questions. They are coming to our channel and asking these questions. They are coming in a context where we are not being intrusive. They are coming to see what we're doing, and then they're asking the question, why can't you just let people believe what they want to believe? And I mean, in the case of the New Covenant group, and I understand I'm not speaking for everybody in this Hangout, but in our case, we have a very inclusive message. We are trying to break down these belief systems that make people feel horrible about themselves and re-enable them to feel wonderful about themselves. And the people who normally are wondering why we can't just stop, putting out these messages that are trying to disable those beliefs, these are the very people that try to indoctrinate people with messages that make them feel horrible. And they're going, and a lot of them go from door to door, like I said.
Their message is on polar opposite from our message. We're inclusive. We want to bring peace to people. We want to bring people together. And the whole tenet of a lot of fundamentalism is that we are terrible. We're condemned. We're born into sin.
And excluded.
It's very, very foreign to a lot of people to hear, wait, maybe God might be about love. That's, for a lot of people, that's a very foreign concept, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Well, I've never been, an advocate of telling anybody what they should or shouldn't believe. Cafeteria Christians or cafeteria Catholics, whatever you want to call it, the folks that go, the Easter, the whatever. I think it's completely harmless if somebody finds comfort and they find hope and all that stuff within whatever that body of faith is. But I think once they start trying to push that and whatever it is that they're learning onto society or onto me or my family, I think that's where you have the problem. So it's not for me. I've got a blog too, just like you, Bob. And for me, it's always been about trying to find the answers. And I think once somebody is in that position, you've got the two types of people that are doing this. You've got one who are your diehard fundamentalists that are, hell bent, for lack of better words, on converting the whole world to their way of thinking. And then you've got the ones that are probably a little on the insecure side and think that the more that they defend it, the more they're actually trying to convince themselves. That's the kind of thing that I've been seeing.
Before
I have a quick question for the audience here, or I guess for the Hangout. Joey brought up an excellent point, I think, and it started with Bob saying it about people coming to us from it. And just, I know that, first of all, out there, we have quick show of hands or by eye. How many of you are atheists?
Aye.
So we've got about 2.5 on that. Deist? Anyone? All right. Pantheist? And then we've got Christians or Jesuits. I mean, this is an extremely inclusive group that we have going on here, believers of one sort or another. I mean, we have a huge variety of people here that have all come from various backgrounds. But I have one question for anybody here who has the answer for it. Has any one of you, since you have come to the position that you're at now, theologically speaking, gone out knocking on somebody's door or chasing somebody down or stood on a street corner with a sign trying to get strangers to engage you in conversations?
I've actually, when I was in Kentucky, there were people on street corners with signs, and I went and talked to them intentionally. But they were already out there with a sign, so I took that as an invitation.
I think that there should be like a tip jar that you put out when you go engage those people. And that's the point that I like to make in this, is that none of us are chasing people down to force them to have these conversations. So whenever I'm asked that question, all I think is like, well, I do leave people alone. And the only people I talk to about this are the people who want to listen. That's...
Right.
So none of you have gone out chasing people down, doing anything like that?
No, I think it's the exact opposite. I'm kind of getting chased down, getting people will read something that I post either on my Facebook page or my blog or my wall, and all of a sudden getting these private, you're a heretic messages. Heretic is a badge of honor for me at this point. But yeah, it's the exact opposite. I feel like I'm getting pummeled with this stuff.
Listen, in just a moment, I'm going to ask Alexa and Ariel to jump in because they have sat quietly. I want to hear what they have to say. But before I do, Greg, let me just ask you off topic. Are you getting an echo back from us this week?
No, it sounds great.
All right, problem solved.
Good.
Alexa, you've been so quiet.
Hi.
You anything to?
Yeah. I wanted to go off. I remember what Greg said. Like, what was the question you said? Why do we feel the need to talk to people about this? Or I mean, to kind of why do we feel the need to not accept what people believe necessarily?
Well, the core question. Yeah, go ahead, Greg. That's the core. She's talking about the core question of this conversation, which is why can't we just leave people alone? Why do and let them believe what they want to believe? That is the basic question.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that when it comes to certain beliefs, maybe it's not just the fundamental ones, but we teach, or at least religious people sometimes teach their kids creationism, and they tell them that's how the world was made. And then it's brought, and that's fine, until it's brought into science classes and people are actually being taught that this is what happened and it's been proven with science and evolution is, crap. And, when you teach these kids these things, also, how the Bible says man shall not lay with another man, these kids grow up, some of them become legislators, and they have immense power over, who can get married and who can't. And that's simply because that's what they were taught to believe. And all of a sudden it comes to a very national political level where it's not just, something that you hold as a belief. This is something that you believe and you impose on everyone else just because it's, you think it's right and the Bible's the holy book in their opinion, so it must be right. And there are a lot of people in this country who, if it says it in the Bible, that I remember I was watching a video about this creationist museum, and this scientist he talked to a resident scientist, I guess, who worked at the museum, and said when they find any evidence for evolution, they ignore it because it goes against the Bible. And the power of the Bible is, their belief in the Bible is greater than actual physical evidence. And they're out teaching people that this is what's right, despite the evidence they've found. And that's where I think belief can be dangerous, because you end up, it's not just something you believe, but you're literally ignoring the facts and instead believing what you believe, and you teach your kids that, and it goes on generation. Now I'm saying it's okay, a sense of comfort and hope, even if I don't believe that, I have no problem with it. But it's the point where, those teachings, they do become really detrimental to a child's education, where I think that, it's not okay.
All right, Alexa.
So you're basically saying that you play an interference pattern. You go direct opposition because they're doing it?
Well, What do you mean? Like, because they're...
Because they're teaching this creationism and...
Sorry,
and
Alexa.
doing
Greg
these
only
harmful
knows
things, you're going
football
the other way.
lingo.
Yeah, right, yeah.
What do you... Well,
Hey,
I mean, I think that, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm such a lover of science, and I know there are some things that, you know, you can't really prove or disprove with science when it comes to religion and spirituality, but there's plenty that you can prove, and the stuff that you can prove should be taught, because, you know, evolution is a theory. We remember this from the debate, because it's falsifiable. We can test it. We can, you know, find things that can go against it and go for it. And that's, you know, once we say, hey, look, that makes sense, we should be able to teach that as science. Creationism, even if it's something someone believes, is not science. Like, it just, I mean, at least maybe that's my opinion. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay.
It is your opinion, but you're correct.
All right, Alexa, the next time you speak, I want you to actually speak with some passion the next time.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not used to this. I'm trying to build up my confidence.
That was a joke. You're
I know.
Ariel, what do you got for us today?
Okay, so my what I wanted to talk about is connection and validation. So, you know, you have a group of people that have bought into a certain belief, whether that's atheism or creationism, and there's sort of an exclusivity, like this is us, this is who I connect to. So there's already an inherent belief in some cases where I can't connect to anybody else. So what I find is people who have learned that their validation comes from themselves have less of a need to look for that in others. So, you know, when I find people, for example, and also as I've started to realize that validation comes from myself, then I'm able to take truth and run it past my own truth checker and come up with an answer, yes or no, or, you know, good or bad. And it's very individual. I have no idea whether that applies to you or not. No.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, so you've got some systems, say for example in Christianity, where you know, everybody's looking to be validated. They're looking for connection. At the same time, I never liked the Christian message, but it was the one I had to connect with, you know, but I didn't, you know, out of desperation of not connecting in any other way and not being able to connect with anybody that didn't agree with that message. It's like, it's a double bind. You know, certainly being, so that's my thoughts on this. You're going to get people that are not only mad that you disagree, but they're mad that you haven't validated their message, who haven't even validated their own message, and they wouldn't know how to connect on any other level.
You know, as I was listening to Alexa speak, what she was saying made me ask this question in my mind: how can we move forward as a people? And when I say as a people, I mean everybody on Earth. How can we move forward in truth if we allow so many lies to be filled in the heads of children and in the heads of people?
Right.
You know, I think that there have been philosophies in the past where people want to move forward as a culture or as a society based upon what they believe to be true, and the result of that is that they have, you know, murdered the people that they disagree with. But that isn't what anybody is saying here. All we're saying is if you are going to fill your children's head with lies, we are going to fight as hard as we can with the words that come out of our mouth to prevent that from happening. Greg, destroy the silence.
All right. I think that is a fantastic way to reword that one, and I think that Ariel and Alexa both hit on that to some extent with the fact that there's people out there spreading bad information, or sort of what was I got from what Alexa was saying, but from what Ariel was saying, there's also, just because there's information out there that you consider bad doesn't necessarily mean that it is bad for those people. They may want the affirmation, but that doesn't mean that your message might not be something that they like more. So
Sure.
by refusing to say anything, you may be actually costing somebody an opportunity to learn or to see the world in a different way that they might appreciate even more.
Right. And nobody,
I think that
nobody's right about everything. You know, just because I think something is
Exactly.
true doesn't mean that I'm right. But it does mean if I think that what you're saying is untrue, it does mean that I should say something. It doesn't mean I should be rude. It doesn't mean I should be cruel with my words, but it means that I should say something that has content that would make you think and consider, and that you should speak back to me in case I'm wrong.
So Nelson, you had something you wanted to say.
Well, it's kind of to the point of Alexa, where she was talking about how the whole fundamentalist side comes in, where they talk about trying to to force this man can't lay with another man or whatever, woman can't lay with another, whatever the nonsense is. But I think it's disingenuous, because the fundamentalist argument is a misogynist and bigoted argument, because they pick and choose certain things that they want to retain from this old covenant law and discard the other ones. So you can't be gay, but you can eat shrimp. You can't have a divorce or what, you can't have what, but you can you can pick up a shovel on Friday night. You can't have you can't be gay, but you can get a tattoo. I mean, all of these things, they go one against the other, and I think it's kind of ridiculous. And so you either, so from a modern perspective, hey, I'm all for modernism, but the modernism, that's not even a word, but whatever, you know what I'm talking about.
It is now.
I think yeah, right. But I think you don't need the Bible for that. You can treat the Bible as the piece of literature that it is, and build a moral argument based on the things that, Greg, you've been really good at talking about, how humanity has evolved and been able to do this. Now, that ultimate sense of morality or that ultimate sense of spirituality that could be from a higher power, that could be connected with, all of us, that pantheistic argument that I like to use sometimes, where we're all one. But, we don't know that. I'm not going to try to bash that into somebody's head, though, and say you have to believe this way. You're going to go to some, mythological place that every pantheistic, every pantheon of Greek and Roman mythology created on its own, too. I think that's the part of it, like you said, where it gets dangerous, and you're just basically scaring people into belief, and that's disingenuous. Why do it?
It's actually interesting, Nelson, because some people, find the inconsistency so great that they actually try and convert back to Judaism and have a greater sense of spirituality. So it almost seems like, the whole idea of cognitive dissonance, that it's like, let's go one way or the other, fully. Let's either obey all the laws or forget them all.
Well, that's where the Kabbalistic perspective comes in, where they start using Zohar and the mystical text to kind of say, you know what, the Old Testament's not really what it is. That consonantal text didn't translate that way. It really means this or whatever. But yeah, I completely get it. Where deeds over creed is what's focused on.
Nick, I saw your hand up. You've been
Ben actually had called dibs.
Dibs.
What?
I'm
Said
cool
Ben had
with
called
that.
dibs, but if you would like to defer to Nick, it's up
Well,
to
he's been
between you
he's
two.
been sitting in the back of the class this
Go
this
ahead,
session. Go ahead, Nick. All eyes are on you. All right, Nick, you're done. Who else wants to speak?
And took too long.
All right, Ben, what's up?
Well, there's been a lot of speaking. Basically, I wanted to address three things. I wanted to talk on Joey, Alexa, and Ariel. Joey gave a really good list of very sort of extreme examples of how religiosity can be dangerous, and we all are pretty well aware of all the extreme examples. They're all kind of in our face, but I think there's something a lot more subtle to this conversation that's kind of lacking, which is the core differences of what actually makes somebody religious versus somebody who's not. And it comes down to sort of not even just Christianity, but all Abrahamic or sort of almost Western religions, if you want to say it like that, share this idea of an afterlife, or a very long life, and a lot of Eastern religions with reincarnation, even though it's not a good thing, so on and so forth. That plays into your head if you think you have less or more than a finite existence. If you're somebody who, let's say, is an atheist of some kind who thinks that this is my one life and that's it, that has a profound impact on the way you treat every single day versus believing that someday I'll go to a paradise. And that's just one thing I think that we should kind of really touch on is the subtle differences, these sort of things we internalize every day that really would make this conversation very meaningful. But when we get to that, we'll get to that. But if you want to, but Alexis said something very interesting. Why I find misinformation, teaching of creationism so intolerable to me, it comes down to what I see maybe politically as what are fundamental rights, maybe as a human being. And most of us agree on most of those things. We have a right to a certain amount of freedom. We have a certain rights to this and that. But I think a wholesome education and an accurate education should be a right. It's not just something that we can leave up to somebody who believes this or these parents or this and that. I think that's something that should be fundamentally given as a right. You should have a right to the consensus of information in academia without bias. I think that's something people should have the right to have. And also Ariel was talking about that in-group mentality, because you've got a major point that everybody totally favors their in-group. Everybody wants to side with their in-group, be in their in-group. I think Marshall McLuhan called it tribal involvement. It's a really good way of describing it, in my opinion. But just that sort of wholesomeness that a lot of people want to achieve. I think as I've moved on from life and as I've gotten away from my days of wanting to become a pastor and this and that, I don't really consider myself an atheist now. I consider myself an apatheist, meaning I don't think religion is an important thing in my life. When people ask me, what do I care about? I say, I don't know, my friends, my family, my hobbies, and that's what I care about. That's where I find fulfillment. That's where I find my in-group, is the people around me. And these days, religion happens to be something that's just sort of circumstantial, that's not that relevant, which is why I'm here today talking to a panel full of different people, because I don't really care about the religious background. I care about good conversations with good people, and that's pretty much it. But I don't know who's next. I think Dennis had his hands up, wherever the moderator wants to send us, but thanks for letting me put my 2 cents in.
Greg, you're the moderator.
Well, let's see. We're gonna. Let me see a quick show of hands. Who's got something to say here? I know that we've got a bunch of them now.
From what I've seen, it's been
Let's
Dennis,
go.
Alexa, then Bob.
Dennis, Nick, Alexa, Bob. That order. Go.
Okay. Well, I want to add something what Joey said about the lies children get grown up with. In my opinion, I think it's good to get rid of all religion in schools, sort of kind of that, and actually teach them with a logic what makes sense without the fear, because that's what I think that's what in all history is going on. It's all based on fear, fear, fear. And they're going to be taught something, but always it's in combination with sort of kind of fear, so that they walk the path the school wants them walk that way. I just want to add to that. So
I'm glad that I just want to chime in on what Dennis said. I'm glad that that we don't have religion in school, but it's not because it's lies, although I do believe that. I like the way that Ben put it. That is that there is no consensus on religion. Whether it's lies or not. Some people believe religion is true, some people don't. But there are all kinds of religions, and there is no major consensus that anybody could possibly agree on. You teach one religion in school, somebody's going to be offended. And right. For that reason and others, it only makes sense to throw it out of school. Who was next, Greg?
That was Nick.
All right, Nick.
Nick?
Go for it.
Time to go.
Sorry, there's some people yelling in the background here. So what I wanted to say is I think Greg's got a really good point. I think that the point about the moderates and why that could be an issue and why you'd want to speak up even to somebody who's moderate in terms of their beliefs if you don't agree with them. One, I think because dialectic, dialogue is, really important to people, hashing out their beliefs and trying to find better ways of thinking about things, but also because I think it matters what people believe and whether or not it's accurate. And I think that discussing it can help us get to a more accurate belief system.
Our beliefs determine our conduct. Who's next, Greg?
Alexa.
Right. I wanted to respond to something that Ben said about, well, I guess from the atheist perspective, how we view, we view this as our only life. When this is to bring up an extreme case, the Westboro Baptist Church, and this is why I'm not saying that I know in no way I don't like them, but they almost follow their scripture more than the people, most people who call themselves Christians, because they say that, they say that God hates fags and all this because they love their fellow man. Because, people are like, well, why don't you love your fellow man, to the Westboro Baptist Church? And they say, we do, because they're trying to help them get into heaven by, making them get rid of their evil ways. So in that sense, it's and that's what I was saying, like, that's why, because, a lot of people who are Christian, it's like, who you say, I believe in the Bible. It's like, oh, really? Which parts? It says man shall not lay with another man. When the Westboro Baptist Church is saying we do love our fellow man because we are telling them, hey, what you're doing is evil. We don't want you to go to hell. And, because they sincerely believe that there is an afterlife. And, I think, it goes without saying whether you believe in an afterlife or not, at least for the people in here, because I think I'm starting to finally gather what sort of opinions the New Covenant have, the members of it. Being, man laying with another man. The Bible's, just, it's not, it shouldn't be taken really as a word of any, supreme being that has, created us. But that's like the kind of thing that could become really skewed when it comes to, they truly believe that they are helping people. And these two boys in the Westboro Baptist Church tried to get community service for their high school, because it's required in high school, or some high schools, for picketing, because they believed that what they were doing was a service to their community because they were saving people from hell. It's a scary perspective, but these kids were raised to believe that. And the adults were raised to believe that. And they believe that's what love is, and that this is, what they're doing is good, and that the afterlife, they want to help people. And, I don't know, it scares me, but it's also really interesting.
I mean, you used about like the most extreme example you could have possibly thought of.
Well, that's true, but a lot of people, like, you're going to hell, don't be, like, just people who, are like, I don't believe in homosexuality is okay because the Bible said so. And, don't hate the sinner, hate the sin. People, not just the Westboro Baptist Church, but anyone who believes that homosexuality is wrong because of the Bible, they're basically saying, this is a sin, you'll go to hell if you do this. So I'm telling you, I don't want you guys to, do this, whatever your activities are together, because I don't want to see you go to hell. It's like, it's good intentions, even from the Westboro Baptist Church, because they really, really believe what they're doing is right. And it's scary, but the more I watch them, the more I realize that they really believe that they're doing a service to humanity.
If I could just jump in though, Alexa, I think that they're also doing a huge service to humanity, because at the same time, they are making people well aware of how ignorant people can actually be.
Yeah,
and what it's doing is building. Yeah, it's building this solid movement against ignorance like that. And to use a cool example, recently on my college campus, I happened to go to a very, very liberal school. It's one of the most LGBT-friendly campuses in America, so on and so forth. Somebody decided to come onto our campus and spew a bunch of hate speech. She was clearly not, all the way there as far as being mentally stable. She was just off the Richter as far as hate speech, along the lines of Westboro. And you would think that a school like this, where people are so liberal, they would, kill her or something, like beat her up. But it didn't happen. What ended up happening is a bunch of people of all colors and shapes and sizes basically just went and dressed up like hillbillies and walked around with her going, "You tell them," and just basically joined in and made light of all of it. And just instead of getting angry, instead of being mad, they just kind of acted like they were a part of it. And it kind of made me proud to be at the school I'm at, because
Like shining light on the ignorance.
That's funny.
shining light on the ignorance, but also treating hate with some understanding, some humor, some love, and not fighting hate with more hate. It was kind of inspiring to see.
All right, Bob keeps waving
I
high.
have to throw something in real quick. I know, Bob, I'm going to let you talk in a second, but I wanted to speak on that for just a moment. Being a biologist and an atheist, one thing that drives me absolutely crazy is that every atheist on the planet seems to think they're a biologist. And go to tell everybody about the theory of evolution. And I'll tell you, I mean, just like the people going, "You tell them." There is no way to make an argument look bad than to argue for it poorly.
Right.
There's no better way to do it. So, Bob, I just had to make that comment quick. Go ahead.
Sure.
What have you been?
Early, even Alexa had made the point that some people just believe in a lie, and that we talk about the evolution, that they believe in creation and put down the idea of evolution. But I find that as a person who is a believer, that I've come to see that that the Western tradition of Christianity is a terrible distortion of what really happened. I think they're not only lying about science, I think they're lying about Jesus. I think they're lying about Christianity. And I mean, for an example, we talk about that. We talk about that one text that says, "Man shall not lie with another man as he would with a woman." The truth is, even the original word in there is a word that's associated with youth. That verse would make more sense to me as being calling a pedophilia an abomination. It's also in a context that deals. It deals with a context of the abuse that they experienced under the previous oppression, and to not do what the others had done, and raping others as a subjected people, a conquered people, was also a common practice in the ancient violent world. And so, we could be talking about that. We take this text, and these people who think of it only in their own Western mindset, based on the traditions of the distortion that have occurred over the years, then want to come here and tell you that the text means things. And as a person who's been trained as a linguist, when I read the Greek and read the biblical text, I find myself shocked that these fundamentalists have the audacity to either lie about the text or have no real clue or right or education in understanding a text. They're just holding on to traditions. So I find it necessary to speak up as a person who's saying, I'll tell you, if Christianity was what these people say it is, I couldn't have anything to do with it.
Bob cannot stand stupid. All right, guys, it is time to wrap up this conversation. So we're going to turn the Hangouts down now. I'm going to say one final thing. Alexa talked about how even the Westboro Baptist Church believes that they are doing what's right when they speak. And I think that goes to the point that is why we are saying something instead of just letting people believe what they want to believe. As much as I hate to say it, our intentions, even with the Westboro Baptist Church or other religions, etc., are similar to ours. We all want to move this world forward based upon what we believe is true, and that is a core reason why the New Covenant group exists, not to force our beliefs on others, but to point out that this should be not about excluding people, but it should be about the conversation. This is why we include people in the conversation that do not believe the way that we believe in any way, because we want to encourage conversation and discourage inclusion or exclusion. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Jones to wrap up the show.
like to spend the next few minutes asking the Google Hangout actually a couple of questions, but let me see if I can frame it first, and then I want to end on this particular note, that is with everyone giving their opinion, that is being a heretic. Years ago, we had something called the Civil Rights Movement. People marched, they used signs, and I think that without those signs, without the marchings, without people thinking outside of the box, doing something outside of the norm, nothing would have changed. And, I'm old enough to remember the majority of that. I remember the day in which women were not treated equally. They could not get jobs adequately or equivalently, that is, to a man. And to say that movement to liberate women wasn't good. They carried signs. I applaud that. The same thing can be said concerning the gay rights movement. Many signs, many parades, just all kinds of people being willing to challenge people to think.
Being aggressive about what they believe.
Exactly. And I remember years ago, and it brings back painful memories. We made a documentary concerning a gentleman who is black, who was arrested for being black, put in jail, stripped down naked, given nothing to cover up with except for toilet paper, in a cell that had no windows, with the temperature actually was dropping into the 20s, low 20s. And he went through this for months. And when we did that documentary, I remember him not even wanting to look at me directly into the eyes. Now, this is well after the Civil Rights Movement. But he could not look a white man into the eyes. He could not look at me. I kept telling him, I love you, I embrace you, and I would try to hug him.
This was 10 years ago.
And finally, after much time of trying to give him information, trying to connect with him with better information, he finally looked at me and started crying. And he felt liberated. And he told me, he said, Dr. Jones, you're the first white man that I've ever looked directly in the eye to. And that just set me free. I was so thankful, but it set him free. And so I'm very much for carrying signs like teaching hell is child abuse. And so I want to know what your thoughts are, each and every one of you guys.
First, let me say that you have destroyed the argument that I made, how many of the people who ask us these questions put their feet in people's doors, and we do not. You have destroyed the purpose of that argument, which is to say that we are not aggressive all the time about what we believe, though sometimes we are. And I agree with you. I agree with you. I hadn't considered that when I was saying that.
Because I would carry a sign in a moment to set people free. I would do that.
I agree with that.
And there are so many freedoms that need to be done. And so what I want to do is I want to go to the Hangout, and I want each and every person, and Greg, would you actually call on the people to answer or just give their opinion concerning what I've stated?
All right, I'd like to start with BJ. It's been a while since we've heard from you.
Yeah, I've try to give everybody their own chance, because I could take up a conversation very easily. I think that's a very good thing to want to do, to have that proactive, that activist type of mentality. But I believe that simply going out and demonstrating, and I've done that before, whether you do it with signs or any other form of media or communication, is that anything that I think that's going to be done or can be done to change is ultimately going to be grassroots. But I believe that it's become too collective. And what I mean by that is I think the focus is going to have to be building more relationships with people on an individual basis that's going to create any type of larger social change. I don't believe that any change can happen from a more collective mentality. I believe it has to start with a change either in thinking or perception of an individual before it can go out into a much larger group and thus affect society.
All right, thank you. How about Nelson?
Well, I think from a door-to-door perspective, the odds are kind of stacked against any one of us. There's 2 billion Christians, there's 1.5 billion Muslims, and They're all being fed the whole nonsense that this is the way that you have to be. I do agree that from a grassroots perspective, it's going to work. But I think ultimately, what's going to win is what's already starting to win: skepticism, science, common sense, reason. With every little thing, every little way that we progress, that I think is what's going to end up doing it in. I think people are more comfortable with accepting their religion as religion and not necessarily as truth. And I think if you can put that into the box and say, hey, here's my God, like the Jews did, it's my little tefla, it's in a box right here and it's mine and I just keep it to myself. I think when people can do that, that's ultimately when the whole society part of it will change, because nobody's forcing it down your throat. But time will tell. I mean, clearly there's been a change between when I was a kid, and some of you older ones, can probably see it even more than me from when you were a kid, and the way modern society is now, and the approach to the Bible and everything like that. People are turning away from it, and I think ultimately that's the trend. It'll just keep going that way.
Nelson, you mentioned two cornerstones of that which destroys religion. You mentioned skepticism and science, but there are actually three cornerstones. I don't know if you're aware of this. It's actually skepticism, science, and Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes.
He's just the embodiment of the other two.
Well, yeah. You gotta don't forget Ricky Gervais. He's a pretty powerful voice.
Oh
for
yes,
this too.
I forgot. Sorry. Four cornerstones.
And now, Nelson, I wanted to comment quick in saying that you said some of you older folks, and I just want you to recognize that in this crowd, that's you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, though, let's see what the older folks do have to say. Bob, you want to give us your 2 cents?
Yeah. I decided to make a sign. I think it's awesome that you are you. I definitely think that more than anything else, I think that one way or another we need to embrace the loveliness of being human and encourage other people to find that loveliness in themselves and others, and so
that was a poorly designed sign, Bob.
I know. I just threw it together.
It was legible though, which is good.
But I was disappointed. There was no chapter verse numbering to it at all.
Yeah.
Bob, chapter 1, verse 1.
Yeah, it's just the way it is going to have to be.
That would be a good opening to a gospel.
Absolutely.
All right. On the note of gospels, who wants to take the next charge? Nick.
Sorry, I keep having trouble with my mute button.
Now, specifically, I want to bring us back to the question that Dr. Jones brought the Hangout back in, because your task is to speak on this specific issue. Can you summarize that question that you asked real quick again, Dr. Jones?
I'm just saying that we had the civil rights movement, we had the movement to liberate women, we've had the gay rights movement, and here more recently we've had David Silverman, Richard Dawkins, and people like that putting billboards up everywhere trying to educate the public. And unless we are out in the public
this is aggressive.
with that kind of information, you're not going to change the way that people think. And we've got to change the political climate. We've got various things that we need to change. And so I just wanted to know what people's thoughts are on that particular subject.
All right, Nick.
With regard to billboards, and I actually was gonna say this, I like the billboards of the Christian groups apologizing for people like the Westboro Baptist Church. I think that is an inherent part of what I think original Christianity was about. I think that the concept of confession got, sort of grotesquely twisted. And I think that honesty in general, and honesty with a group that you can count as your in-group, and that you can have sort of a real conversation with, and real feedback, honest feedback from, I think that's sort of inherent to the original idea. I also think that the idea of them apologizing for, I guess, I don't know, they're apologizing for other people, so it's sort of, there is an issue, I guess, with that. But I don't know, I thought that was one of the best things I've seen in terms of Christian billboards. We're sorry.
I hear you. That's true apologetics. Back to the moderator. Where are we going, Greg?
Let's see what Ariel has to say next.
Okay, so I think there was a guy, Bruce Watcho, and he talks about the models for religion and how previously up till now, religions provided the best description and path towards what you might call self-actualization. But it was based on some old mystical models. So as science is beginning to explain that, the church is losing relevance, and they're losing their place of influence, and they're losing their control. So I do believe it is the age of reason, and that we see, that we see church groups trying to become more controlling in their methodology versus trying to lead from a place of influence. That science is actually taking the lead by influencing versus controlling people is admirable. I think there's room for both to add to the discussion.
Ben, don't you think, though, that in the spirit of science, that we should look anthropologically back at what has been accepted by large groups of human beings, these ideologies and these things like I just mentioned with regard to what I think the original idea of confession was. Don't you think that we should look at that and try to understand that? Isn't that something that's very informative in terms of social psychology and anthropology and cultural psychology?
I think we're getting off the topic a little bit with that.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just saying, I think that's...
It's a nice comment, but unfortunately I don't think we can afford the time to go
And I
into
agree
that.
with you.
Hey, Greg, we're running out of time. We need to make this quick. Let's be expeditious. Let's go ahead and finish with the panel. I want to
Greg.
make my final comments, and I do appreciate all of you guys being on my show. Let's make it quick.
Get with it, buddy.
All right, so Alexa and Dennis and Ben are the three that have not commented.
Not
yet,
all
right?
at once. Let's have Alexa.
Okay. Back to what Dr. Jones was talking about with the activism. I'm a very strong activist when it comes to science, reason, and secularism. That is what drives me to go out every day and
We couldn't
I don't
tell.
know, not
We
live.
couldn't tell at all.
Well, either way, I'm always an advocate when it comes to teaching people to be more tolerant and think more logically. I always say it starts it's grassroots, but also with kids. We were talking about doctrine and indoctrinating people before. It's important to teach kids at a young age, the facts. And, you can teach about people's different opinions, but once people are, people become deluded at a very young age, they grow up believing this, and, it's reinforced by both, the fear of going to hell and, what they've always been taught, and everyone's always telling them, and, just all of that. It's very important to be able to teach people from a very young age. And, along with other sorts of activism, but I think that's one of the most important types.
I think teach them to think and not teach them what to believe. Dennis.
Exactly. Teach them how to think, not what to think.
Well, my opinion about this that first of all, the abuse needs to be stopped, and second, when the movement is going on the streets for rights or for make a point, I think Soleil is a good point. Unless it is done with respect for everyone. That's my thing. Yeah.
Greg,
And
who's left?
Ben.
I'm just going to keep it short because you guys are really running out of time. So just want to say I love everything the New Covenant Group's doing. This is the right direction. As long as you're not doing any harm, you're doing some good. And this group is definitely doing good. The idea of bringing people together and agreeing on something is something that most people don't take into account when it comes to talking about religion. It's all about trenches and withholding your position. And here it's all about compromise. It's all about putting everything on the table. And it's about the ideas. It's about what we're actually talking about, the content. It's just a really cool place to be. It's a cool thing to be a part of. And thanks for letting me be here. Thanks for everyone who came. It's nice to be here.
All right,
It's a really cool thing,
I'm going to send you your
Thank you.
T-shirt.
I want to put my my commentary on this one as well. Dr. Jones asked why, about the billboards and things like that. I have to say that I fully support standing out on street corners to picket certain things and to put up billboards to say things, and for one and only one very explicit reason, because that's what the Christian, or well, the fundamentalists, the evangelists do. I call myself a devangelist because it is a play on words. It is very specifically an answer. Right, because I worship Satan and he's the Lord of darkness.
Come on, wrap it up, Satan.
Quit distracting me, Joey. It boils down to this: is that as soon as the religious folks of the world stop putting up their own signs, they stop standing on street corners, they stop indoctrinating children, I'll stop using their tactics against them. But as long as they're going to continue doing that, there is no way that what I believe is truly a war of ideas can be won if only one side is using the heavy artillery.
I respect that point. I think that in a heartbeat you would go on Saturday Night Live, would you not, to do political and religious satire?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd be invited, but I'd love to.
Yeah, I know that you would. I think it's so powerful that people are using Facebook pics with quotes just to nuance points, trying to move people forward. I find that screenwriters in Hollywood are actually making movies attempting to move people forward. And so to sit back and just allow, people to be static in their belief, I think it's wrong. It's essentially wrong. And if we're going to move forward as a people, we need to consider that the educational processes can't be within the four walls of a school system. It has to be, the classroom needs to be the world. And so we need to relook and investigate, what the educational paradigm is. Is our classroom the world or just inside of one particular school? And I think that it needs to be the world. Everyone deserves, like Benjamin was saying, everyone has a right to an education. And some people are not going to get an education without this kind of media. And so, if you have a Facebook account, take pics, do whatever you can simply to give people something to think about. Be like Greg, get on Saturday Night Live and make a point.
That's the message of tonight. Everybody be like
Dr.
Greg.
Jones, we talked earlier.
That should be the message of everyone.
I Skyped you earlier, and we were talking about how to actually go out making a change. And you talked right now about seeing this in popular culture. I just want to say real quick that it's difficult for these sort of conversations to make it into popular culture only because they're so traditionally controversial and because there's so much money at stake in things like Hollywood, television series, everything. You're not going to see this just because of the risk people don't want to run to get this message on TV. And these sort of grassroots movements, these conversations, picketing, all of that, that's the way that this sort of thing is going to have to change. So like I said earlier, like what we're doing is perfect. This is exactly what needs to be happening, legitimizing this conversation and having it go all over the internet because it's not going to go onto cable TV. That's just the way it is.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank Bob Graves for a show tonight. He was challenging linguistics, left and right, that is, in the religious paradigm, and he is moving people forward. We need to applaud Bob for doing that. And the same thing can be stated concerning Greg Bray and the rest of our panelists. Everyone here I respect,
What about me?
and you guys are moving people forward. You know that you are. I applaud you. And so my wife and I are behind you guys, and we're so thankful for you guys. We are out of time. And so without any hesitation, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you very, very much for being on the show. And so let's end by looking at Joey's face.
Close the curtain before Ben says something else. Quick. Close it.
Thank you, guys.